Hey, what's up guys? My name is Jared and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be creating a product animation in Houdini and Redshift. We're going to go over some core principles such as creating a lighting system, adding keyframes, doing camera animations, and then multi-camera switching. And then we're going to export it at the end such that our disk won't write the file over itself a whole bunch of times. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I have only imported my geometry, and that is purely because it's such a long process, how I prefer to do it, that I just chose to leave it out of this video. If you want to see how I prefer to import geometry into Houdini, you can go and watch the Houdini 101 series. There'll be a card somewhere, I think over here, to the video about importing geometry and assigning materials. So that being said, this is all I have. I have my controller and it has been textured. I have these 5 materials that are all assigned to the different parts here. And we are just going to create the little animation that you saw in the intro starting now. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a simple lighting setup. And for me, this is going to consist of an HDRI and 1 area light. And the reason being, for simplicity's sake, so that we can go over some key principles and get out of here as quick as possible. So to create an HDRI, first of all, lights in Houdini go just up in the object network. They live here with your geometry. This is basically your layers pane. So we can just add in an HDRI in Redshift by hitting tab and adding in an RS light dome, which is basically an HDRI. We can call this like environment if we want to. We can come into the light tab and then we can specify a texture. And I will go into my grayscale gorilla textures and select one of these quasar banks. We'll go quasar bank 16. And so now we have this HDRI in here. And if I open my Redshift render view, you can see that we are very far away because Redshift created this camera and we need to move it in. So let's come up here to select our camera, hit cam 1. We'll check this lock button to lock it to view and then move in on our model a little bit. And so now you can see that we have this lighting setup, which is looking pretty good already, honestly. We don't want to see our HDRI in the background, so let's go ahead and go into the environment tab and uncheck background. And then likewise, let's come into our viewport, hit D, which is your display options for the world, and uncheck display environment lights as backgrounds in the background tab. I'm also going to take my color scheme to dark because it is more indicative of what my scene actually looks like than light. So this is looking good already. We honestly don't even need an area light. I'm more just going to do it to show the process. So if I hit tab in my environment once again, I can just add an RS light, which is an area light. And then we can call this like top, because I'm going to just move this light up top. To do so, I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard and rotate this thing down roughly 90 degrees on its x-axis. And then move it up above my model. And you should be able to see it's just getting blown out now. So I'm going to come into my light settings and holding my middle mouse button to change these increments, I'm going to bring the whole uniform scale down to like 0.2. So it's really small. You can just see its size decreased up here. And it just added this little hair light kind of on top of our environment. If we do any kind of fog or anything later, this light will be the only one contributing, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, so now we have our basics of lighting done in Redshift, and we are ready to go ahead and do some camera animating. I'm going to close this render view and add it as a panel up here. So you can do that by clicking this plus icon and coming in here and doing a Redshift render view tab. That's just so I don't have to switch back and forth a ton of times. So when we opened our render view initially, we got this cam 1, and I'm going to rename this cam 0, and you will see why in a little bit. What we're going to do is move this camera into place. So if you still have your handle tool selected, hit escape and you will get back into your camera tool. So we're going to move this into place, and I'm going to have my first shot come slow from down here somewhere like really on the side. And to kind of set this camera in place, what we need to do is create keyframes. And we can do that by hovering over the translation options or the rotation even in the transform tab of our camera, and just hit K, just hovering over it. You don't have to click or anything like that. If you want to, you can right click and go to keyframe and set keyframe, or you can alt left click on any value and make a keyframe. There's several ways, but just hover over and hit K and you will be good to go. So now our first keyframe is set, but it's important before we move off the first frame to set our animation options. These are going to be things like our frame rate and our total number of frames and stuff like that. And so I've already done mine, and I forgot that I already did mine, but to do this, just come up here to Windows and go to the global animation options. This is 30 by default. 24 frames per second animation is going to look best. And then my animation, I'm setting to 300 frames. You can do whatever you want in here. These are just your options for all of your, animation as a whole. So you can do what you want. I'm going to hit close. And now I'm going to come forward to frame 100 because I'm going to do 100 frames per shot. And I need to move this camera into the position that I want it to end up in. So this is going to be just kind of a simple orbit move around to the front of this device. So something like this. Maybe I move back just a little bit, something like this. And then I can just come up here and hit K again, over translate. And if I scroll through this, you can see our initial camera animation is done, or so you might think. Toggle this little real-time animation button down here and play through it in real time. You see, it's like ramping by default. There's, a spline to this animation unless you've changed your preferences. We don't want that. I want this to be really slow and linear. So what I'm going to do is select this camera, come up to Windows Animation Editor, and then I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see. We have Cam 0 selected already, and I'm just going to hit Control A to select all these values. And you can see this function down here says Bezier, or Bezier, however you say it. A Bezier curve is what's causing that kind of spline animation. So you can see this this curve makes an S, and so it goes really slow and then fast and then slow again at the end. We want these to be linear, so I'm going to take this Bezier or Bezier function and just type linear and hit enter, and that should give us a linear function on the timing of this animation. And we can see in here that it does. So that's exactly what we wanted. Go ahead and save your project just so you don't lose this. And now it's time to make our second camera animation. So let's come over into our object network and hit tab and create a new camera. This will be cam 1. And again, I will show you why in a little bit. switch your view to cam 1 so that you can see what it sees. And I'm going to have the second one do a similar move around this left edge from a much more kind of central view, I guess, or like there's more in the frame. On frame 100, which is the last frame of animation for the first shot, we are going to create our first frame of animation for this shot. So I'm going to come up to my translation, hit K, and now our position and rotation are keyframed for camera 1. Go forward, I'm going to go to frame 200, and we can go ahead and make our camera moves around our object at this time. So I'm going to come around something like this. Do a little bit of animation here. And I'm going to try to set this value over here maybe to something a little different. What about like 8? Not what I wanted. Hold on. Let's come into the actual incremental changes here and something right about should be something right about here. Sorry, I'm just dialing in this shot. Okay, right about there. And then I'm going to hit K on my keyboard here. And you can see that we have another Beziered animation. So selecting camera 1, come into Windows, Animation Editor, select all your keyframes with Control A under Cam 1, and replace this Bezier with linear. And if we play through now, we have ourselves a linear animation from frame 100 to frame 200. Very nice. So let's go into why these cameras are switched, or why I switched their names. So let's go ahead and switch between these two cameras, and this will show you how we are going to do the third camera to make these switch between each other. So we've got this shot here. You can see this second camera moving, or our first camera rather moving. We need to actually see what this camera sees and then make it switch right here. To do that, we are going to hit Tab and add in what's called a switcher, which is just an element that's used to switch cameras, basically. So if I bring this down here, we can wire these in, and you can see that the default value is 0 on the switcher, and that's why we renamed this camera to 0, just for clarity's sake. So if I wire both of these cameras into this switcher and come up to our actual like display camera and set it to that switcher, you can see that it locks to whichever camera this is on. So you can do this with, in theory, as many cameras as you want. I'm going to come to frame 100, or rather 99. Hit K on this switch camera to have it at 0. Come forward 1 frame, set it to 1, and hit K. And then if you play through this, we have our 2 linear animations looped back to back. Easy. Now we make our third camera animation, and then we will export. So I just need to come in here, make a new camera. This will be cam 2. We can go ahead and wire this into the switcher. Come to frame 199, hit K on camera 1, go forward 1 frame, switch this to 2, hit K right there. And now starting on frame 200, we can switch into cam 2, back out, and go ahead and set up this little animation here. We are going to just move into position and I'm going to start right here. I'll hit K over translation, move to frame 300, and then I want to be moved back a long way, kinda. And I want to be rotated like this way. Let's see. Something like that, just on a weird angle. And I'll hit K, and so now we've got this animation for our final frames. Now for this one, I don't actually want it to be linear. I just want to edit the curves that we already have. So let's come into Window, Animation Editor, and then let's see. We've got, let's see, our Translate Z is going to be our biggest. Translate Z, we want to come something like this probably, if I had to guess. Yeah, so this starts fast. If we just pull this handle up on our Z axis, this animation is going to start fast and slowly ramp out, which is exactly what I want. So now if we switch back into our switcher in our view, we can go and watch this through from start to finish. And that looks pretty damn good to me. So let's come into our render view, hit play, kind of take a look at some of these frames here. We need to set our switcher object in Redshift. Looks good on our animation. All our frames look good. And I am mostly pleased with this. I'm going to come into my materials and just change one of these very quickly. Change some emission. So we are ready to kind of set this up to render. You know, it's nothing crazy on the animation side. Just kind of wanted to make this quick little video about this. So now let's go ahead and do a simple render. Let's come into our out network. I'm going to come back to one of these frames. Let's go into or hover over our Redshift ROP1. Let's come into, let's see. Let's come into Redshift. Let's go advanced. I'm going to go 200 samples there. Motion blur enabled. Leave that on default. Global illumination. I'm going to go 6s around the board on all these. Just kind of moving through fairly quickly. I have other videos where I go in depth on Redshift render settings. If you would like to see those, you can find them on my channel quite easily. I'm going to want to save this as a PNG sequence, 16-bit, and then resolution override. Let's go ahead and go user specified resolution. Let's go 3840. 3840 by 20, let's go 817 times 2. Zoom out here. Let's recheck some of these frames real quick. Very nice. I'm gonna uncheck these post effects on this last camera here. All right, very nice. Just a very simple product animation. And so then now to export this, we need to go to, first we need to change our render camera to the switcher. And then on output, let's go into a selector here. Let's go Z, just put these wherever you want. And then to have this save as an animation, you need to do, name it whatever you want. So I just call mine frame underscore, and then you're going to need to type $F to have it actually render each frame individually. Otherwise, Houdini will actually just render your frames over themselves. So just do that and hit accept. And then you can just hit render to disk, and Houdini starts to do its thing. So I hope this was helpful in one way or another. Animating in Houdini is not that intimidating. It's just a lot of steps, and it's very hard to explain sometimes, even though it's really not that difficult to do. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I always hang out in my comments. I don't think I've ever not responded. So I hope this was able to bring you some sort of value. Leave a like on the video if it did. I appreciate any subscriptions that come from this. The dislike button works extra well if you hit it twice. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.